It is very hard to catch a DM cheating. Why would a DM cheat? They already control the entire world. They already decide when the sun rises and when the mountain falls. There is nothing left to take. But some DMs are so insecure about their own stories that they start inventing rules mid-sentence, wedging homebrew into the game like a man hammering a square peg into a round hole and daring anyone at the table to complain. Tonight's story is about one of those DMs he invented brand new punishments on the spot. He gave himself a DMPC who was magically always right. He set up an obvious trap, and when the party refused to walk into it, he simply told them they were inside the trap already. And then one player, the cleric, the quiet one, the one getting targeted by every single new rule, figured out something the DM had not planned for. The rules the DM kept inventing could be used against the DM. My name is Isabella, and this is the story of the DM who railroaded his own plot twist into a cliff. The party had been on hiatus. Their regular DM wanted a break, and nobody else had the stomach to run a campaign, so the group had simply stopped playing D&D for about half a year. That is a long time for a table to go dark. People drift, schedules harden, and the muscle memory of rolling initiative fades. So when two of the group's friends introduced a new DM, a guy who was apparently willing to take over the reins, everyone was cautiously excited. The new DM talked about the campaign constantly, over text, in voice chat, on game nights that had not started yet. He talked about his world building, his plot twist, how shocked everyone was going to be at the end. He said he had been DMing his entire life. He promised the session one of a lifetime. I want to flag something gently because this is a pattern. When a new DM arrives at your table and spends more energy advertising the campaign than preparing it, that is a small red flag, not a deal breaker. Some DMs are genuinely excited and that excitement leaks out as hype. But there is a difference between a DM who says, I have been working on something cool, I hope you like it, and a DM who says, the plot twist at the end will shock everyone. The first DM is inviting you into a story. The second DM is auditioning for applause, and if the applause does not come, the second DM tends to start rewriting the script on the fly. The party was a courier service. That matters. Everyone played someone who worked in a shipping company inside a sprawling city, a delivery guild that moved packages through streets and catacombs, and anywhere coin was paid to reach. The storyteller's character was a courier of indeterminate heroism. There was a cleric, the moral center of the group, also a courier. Two rogues who were friends with the DM, also couriers. An artificer. The party was tight, the premise was interesting, and the campaign started well. Session 1, the DM walked them through the world, explained the theme, let everyone introduce their characters, and then pointed them at the quest. There was a necromancer in the city who was killing people and raising them to do her bidding. The party's job was to find her, track her, and end her. It was a classic mystery setup, and honestly the DM did it right. The party followed leads, questioned NPCs, pieced together clues, and it felt like a real investigation. And then they met the sorcerer. The DM described the sorcerer the way a man describes his own original character at a convention. Undead Asar, long white hair, half his face a skull, one eye glowing a cool blue in the dark. A trench coat, because of course a trench coat. The sorcerer had been turned undead by a necromancer, and now he wanted revenge. He offered to help the party with their investigation, and the party politely accepted. Over the next few in-game days, with the sorcerer tagging along, they uncovered that the necromancer would be at the inn that very night. The party was excited. They started laying out tactics, planning an ambush, assigning roles. And then the cleric looked at the city map on the table and said, "Wait a minute." The cleric pointed at the map. The inn was right down the street from the catacombs. Out of all the nights they had been investigating and all the locations where they could have finally pinned the necromancer down, she just happened to be at the one spot that was tactically perfect for her. She was steps away from her own stronghold, steps away from an escape route, steps away from her army of undead. This was a trap. And it got worse. The information had come from an undead sorcerer. An undead sorcerer who had already admitted on arrival that he had been raised by a necromancer. The party's own briefing from Session 1 said that undead served the necromancer's bidding. So either this sorcerer was lying about his free will, or the necromancer had planted the information specifically to lure them. Either way, walking into that inn tonight was a terrible idea. I want to stop and appreciate this moment because it is what good tabletop play looks like. The cleric was not being contrarian. The cleric was using the information the DM had provided inside the world the DM had built to reason out the obvious. The DM had built a coherent world. That is a compliment. In a coherent world, players can think. In a coherent world, clues connect. In a coherent world, a good group will occasionally figure out the twist before the DM is ready for them. That is not a failure of play. That is a success. The whole table felt the gears shift. There was a kind of mental whiplash where everyone suddenly realized they had been sprinting down the wrong alley. The DM sat quietly for a beat. Then he excused himself and he took a very long bathroom break. The storyteller, charitably, assumed the DM was rethinking things, maybe pacing, maybe stepping back to adapt to the party's correct read of the situation. Maybe, he was going to come back with grace, roll with the change, and find a new way to put pressure on the group. That was the hope. It is not what happened. The DM returned and the session resumed and the sorcerer walked in. Apparently he had been listening the whole time. The sorcerer insisted he was on their side, and that they needed to move fast and that there was no time for these doubts. The party asked the obvious question: how can we trust an undead when you just told us the necromancer raises undead to serve her? The sorcerer repeated his backstory word for word and added that he had retained his free will. Just trust me. Just take my word for it. The party did not buy it because the party had ears. The DM, seeing that his DMPC was not closing the sale, called the session. Here is the rule, and it applies to DMing, to writing, to television, to film. Once you establish a rule in your world, you are bound by it. If you say undead serve the necromancer, then an undead who claims to serve no one is a suspicious undead. You do not get to handwave that by saying this one kept his free will just because. A cheap exception to a rule you set is not a plot twist. It is a cheat code. And the second your players notice you using cheat codes, the table stops believing the world. Stakes evaporate. Decisions become meaningless. If any rule can be broken when the DM needs it to be broken, why should the players bother to reason about anything ever again? A week passed. The storyteller reasonably assumed that the DM would show up to session 2 having processed the situation. Maybe he would have a new hook. Maybe the necromancer would shift locations. Maybe the sorcerer would be exposed. Any of those would have worked. Instead, the DM opened session 2 with a monologue. You stand at the entrance of the inn. The streets are patrolled by city guards. You will need to sneak in to avoid being spotted after curfew. Party blinked. No one had agreed to go to the inn. They had spent the entire end of session 1 explaining in character and out that the inn was a trap. And yet here they were standing in front of it because the DM said so. A brief back and forth followed. The DM simply stated flatly that they were at the inn now and they needed to sneak in. That was it. No acknowledgement, no compromise. The plot had decided where the characters were standing and the characters were expected to catch up. This is what railroading looks like. And I want to be fair because there is a spectrum. Linear games can be great. Some of the best tabletop modules are essentially guided tour. The problem is not linearity. The problem is the illusion of choice. If you sit your players down and say, this campaign is a fixed narrative, we are going to hit these beats, just enjoy the ride, many players will happily sign up. But if you dangle agency in front of them, and then yank the steering wheel the moment they turn left, that is a different experience. That is not storytelling. That is gaslighting with dice. The cleric, visibly frustrated, went along. The party stealthed in. Perception checks were rolled around the table. The storyteller rolled highest, but the DM, without looking up, announced that the cleric was the one who spotted the necromancer, because of course the cleric was. The necromancer was sitting at a table. She spotted the cleric looking at her. She pulled out a pendulum. She began to hypnotize him. The cleric failed his save. From the rest of the party's point of view, he was staring at nothing, frozen in a trance. From the cleric's point of view, he was in a shadow realm, alone with the necromancer who cast magic missile at him. The missile tore through his armor. Real damage, real wounds. The rest of the party noticed their cleric bleeding out in a chair while they sat around a tavern doing nothing, so they started healing him. The cleric, still in the shadow realm, fought back. He started casting a spell of his own, and exactly as he finished the verbal component, he snapped out of the trance. The town guard, who had apparently been watching the whole time, saw him mid-cast. The guards drew their weapons. One of them shouted that magic was illegal and punishable by death on sight. The entire table turned and looked at the DM out of character. No one had been told at any point in the entire campaign that magic was illegal. It had certainly never been mentioned as a capital crime. The DM shrugged and said, "Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Roll initiative." Let us take a moment here. In a world where magic is punishable by death, a courier service would absolutely, 100% brief every new hire about the law. The city would have posters. There would be checkpoints. A cleric, whose entire job description is public spell casting, would have encountered this rule on day one. Hiding a core legal fact of the setting until the precise moment it can be used to punish a player is not world building. It is an ambush. And it is the kind of ambush you build when your plot is collapsing and you need a quick win. The fight began. The guards ignored the rest of the party and focused entirely on the cleric. One of them rolled a hit, and the DM described it in loving detail. The guard smashes your chest with his hammer, driving the broken shards of your chest plate into your own chest. Your own armor stabs you. Take an additional 3d4 damage. The cleric objected. That rule is not in the book. The DM said helpfully that this was more realistic. He added that he would do the same to any criminal with, quote, shattered armor. The entire table erupted. Everyone except the two rogues who happened to be the DM's friends from outside the group. The rogues backed the DM up. It was unclear whether they genuinely agreed with the ruling or whether they were simply supporting a buddy, but the effect was the same. The DM had backup and he leaned on it. The shattered armor rule stayed. The cleric's armor bonus was gone until he bought a replacement. A replacement, by the way, that cost 600 gold pieces. The combined treasury of the entire party was 250 gold pieces. Do the math. The fight continued. The guards continued to ignore everyone except the cleric, and then a guard rolled a 19. The DM, again without looking up, announced that critical hits were instant downs, and guards crit on a 19 or 20. Both of those rules were news to the entire table. Neither appeared in any official rulebook. Both were announced at the exact moment they hurt the cleric most. Without the cleric to buff them, the fight was going badly. Things were looking lethal. And then the DM's sorcerer, the trench coat wearing half-skull undead, jumped into the fray and turned the tide. He saved the day. The DM's special little guy got to be a hero, right in front of the same party who had last session correctly identified him as a plant. The party won the fight. The necromancer escaped. In the direction of, you guessed it, the catacombs. There is a better version of this entire arc, and it only requires one small change. The DM wanted the party in the catacombs. Fine, great. Many campaigns funnel through a dungeon, but instead of railroading them, give them a reason to go, make them care. If the players love the city, tell them the necromancer will overrun it. If the players love an NPC, have the NPC captured and held in the catacombs. If the players hate the necromancer personally, make her mock them from the entrance and retreat inside. Any of those choices would have put the party into the catacombs willingly. And when a player dies in a dungeon they chose to enter, that death is noble. It is a sacrifice, it is story. But when a player dies in a dungeon they were dragged into, that death is resentment. It is proof that none of it mattered. The DM had a week to come up with the hook. He came up with nothing and settled for force. After the fight, the cleric noticed something on his forehead. He touched it, looked in a mirror and discovered a third eye had grown on his face. He tried to identify the effect and failed. Right on cue, the sorcerer appeared. Oh no, the sorcerer said, you have the spy's curse. The necromancer can see everything you see. Now she will hunt you. The sorcerer reassured the party helpfully that if he were a traitor he would not be sharing this information. So obviously he was not a traitor. Obviously. The party took a long rest and planned. The DM's sorcerer kept piping up over and over to remind them that they needed to go to the catacombs. Over and over, every few minutes. The storyteller pointed out politely that the necromancer had been in town longer than the party. If she was such a threat, why was she not already rampaging? What was she waiting for? The sorcerer had no answer, because there was no answer. The whole thing was a push. And then, predictably, the party was attacked during their rest by undead. The cleric went down again because his armor had been taken by the plot. The DM made a point of describing the sorcerer jumping in and taking damage to save him. The sorcerer was hero of the hour again. The fight took forever. The session ended. The storyteller and the artificer, out of character, were ready to walk. A quick aside, because there is a thing the DM did right, and I want to give credit for it. The spy's curse was actually clever. An always-on tracking device embedded in a player character is a gift to a DM. It gives you infinite, deniable reasons to throw encounters at the group. It gives the party a visceral motivation to find the villain and kill her, because the villain is literally inside their teammate's head. This is good antagonism. A villain who is always watching is scarier than a villain you have to hunt. The problem is that the DM paired this good idea with a dozen bad ones, and none of them landed. The storyteller showed up to session 3 ready to either quit or simply shut up and follow the railroad to the catacombs, whichever came first. The plan was to appease the DM one time and see if the game recovered. The game did not recover. The cleric, fed up with being targeted, decided to take matters into his own hands. He put on a disguise to avoid the guards and walked back to the shipping company. The sorcerer reminded him, because of course, that the necromancer could see through his eyes no matter what he was wearing. The cleric ignored him. He said he was going to pick up a delivery job to earn money for new armor. The rest of the party warned him that while he might be safe from the guards in disguise, he was not safe from the undead. He had no reply. He went anyway. The storyteller thought about stopping him, and then remembered that the cleric was the smart one at this table, and that if the cleric was making a move, there was probably a reason. So the cleric walked out alone. The cleric arrived at the shipping company. The DM grinned. Oh, the DM said there is one job available, a weapons shipment to the city guard outpost. Of course there was. The cleric, not born yesterday, said he would need a lot of gold for that. The DM said 100 gold. The cleric haggled. 150. The DM agreed with one condition. The cart had to be returned in perfect condition before sunrise. The cleric took the job. The cart rolled out of the shipping company at dawn, and within minutes it was attacked. 2 skeleton dogs came at the back of the cart. The necromancer stepped out in front of it. The DM presented the dilemma. If you drive the dogs off, the necromancer will climb onto the cart from the front. If you focus on the necromancer, the dogs will jump aboard. The cleric was supposed to pick his poison. What the cleric actually did was hop onto the back of the cart, spear the dogs off in a single turn and swerve out of the necromancer's way. He rolled to stabilize the cart. He passed. He kept driving. The DM, a little flustered, described a dark silhouette in the distance. As the cart drew closer, the silhouette resolved into a wall of skeletons. A mob. The necromancer, he said, was right behind them. Turn back or be crushed. The whole party called this out immediately. There was no way the necromancer could have positioned a mob on the exact street the cleric was about to swerve onto. She had no way to know which street he would pick. She had no way to teleport a skeleton army onto pavement. The DM, without missing a beat, said the necromancer could see all possible outcomes and was prepared for this one. And he added, with visible satisfaction, that if the party had listened to the information they had been given, they would not be in this position. Think about what that means. The necromancer could see all possible outcomes. That is not a plot. That is a god. That is a DM handing himself unlimited authority to manifest any obstacle anywhere at any time. Once a DM starts citing omniscience as a mechanic, there is no longer a game. There is only the DM's imagination, and the players are just spectators. And here is where the cleric, the quiet one, the punching bag of the campaign, the one who had been singled out and railroaded from session 2, did the thing. He looked down at his character sheet, and he said, I cast turn undead. The skeletons cannot touch me. The DM tried to argue. The cleric pointed at the book. The DM backed off. The skeleton mob melted. The cleric kept driving. The necromancer, now cast as an ordinary person on foot, tried to chase the cart because the DM had not built her with any speed spells. The cleric sped up. He made the delivery. And as the guard fortress loomed into view, the DM, clearly frustrated, announced that the necromancer had jumped aboard the cart from the side. There was an audible sigh at the table. At this point, the DM was not even pretending to care about internal consistency. He just wanted the cleric dead. The DM described the necromancer's surprise attacking the cleric on the cart. He gave her a free surprise round. He gave her initiative on top of the surprise round. The cleric was low on health. He cast a heal on himself. The DM described the wagon catching fire in black and green flames that reeked of death. The wagon was no longer controllable. The cleric was hit by another round of magic missiles. The cart crashed through the front gates of the city guard outpost, splintering the doors wide open. The cleric somehow survived. He lay prone on the ground 10 feet from the burning wagon. The DM described the guards and the necromancer both approaching the fallen cleric, ready to kill the intruder. The cleric looked up from his sheet. No, he said, they do not. What do you mean, no? Asked the DM, and the cleric laid it out. The guards are loyal to the city. They would not attack a defenseless courier they were expecting. And they would absolutely, under your own rules, attack the undead currently casting magic inside their own walls. Your exact rule. Magic is punishable by death on sight. The DM tried to come up with a counter-argument. He could not, there was none. His own rule had just been turned against him in broad daylight. The guards, forced by the logic of the world he himself had established, attacked the necromancer instead. Initiative was rolled. The cleric went first. He healed himself and ran to close the gates. The guards engaged the necromancer. She started life stealing them. It was an even fight, and then a guard rolled a 19. The whole table stopped. Was that a crit? Was that an instant down because those were the rules, the DMPC rules? His own homebrewed additions invented in session 2 specifically to hurt the cleric. The DM, visibly sweating, tried to brush the 19 aside. The party would not let him. He finally said no, the necromancer does not die to the city guard. Not today, not like this. But it was over. The spell was broken. The cleric had out-rules lawyered the DM at his own game, using the DMPC's own homebrew against him in front of the entire table. The plot was dead. The necromancer was a husk. The session ended. The game fell apart. The storyteller's regular DM, the one who had taken a break, came back from retirement and offered to run a proper campaign. Everyone accepted instantly. The new campaign picked up right where the old one had ended. The first scene was the cleric, tired and scraped and smoke-stained, limping back to the inn. He said, "I do not think we have to worry about the necromancer anymore." And he added with a tired grin, "I think I might also be fired." The table laughed for the first time in weeks. And the plot twist the old DM had been hyping, the big shock, the promised gasp was this. At the end of the campaign, the necromancer would have killed the entire party, and the party would have come back to life at the very end just to overthrow her. That was the twist. The whole campaign was going to be the party getting dragged under the necromancer's thumb, railroaded into defeat session after session, with no agency, so that the DM could stage a triumphant resurrection finale. Every bad rule, every targeted ambush, every handwave of logic, was there to keep the party on rails until the DMPC's big scene arrived. I want to say something unexpectedly kind about this DM. He was not talentless. He built a coherent city, with a courier guild with catacombs, with a necromancer who had actual menace. He invented the spy's curse, which is a genuinely good mechanic. He paced session 1 like a real mystery. The foundation was there. The failure was not imagination. The failure was ego. The moment his players outthought his plot, he panicked, and instead of accepting the compliment, he started inventing punishments. Shattered armor, magic is illegal, crit on a 19, omniscient necromancer. Each new rule was not a world-building choice. It was an attempt to reassert control over a story that was no longer his, and in the end his own rules became the weapon that ended his campaign. The cleric did not cheat. The cleric did not break the game. The cleric simply read the rules, all of them, including the ones invented for him to lose by, and turned them back on the person who wrote them. There is a lesson here for any DM watching. When your players figure out your twist early, do not panic, do not retcon, do not punish them for being smart, take it as a compliment, embrace the loss, the story changes, that is fine. A good story survives the players being cleverer than you. A bad story dies the moment you try to force it not to. This DM forced it, and his cleric with a turn undead and a quoted rulebook was the one who buried the campaign. Until next time.